Hello everyone and welcome to this new AppGyver tutorial. In this tutorial I will take you step by step to understand how to connect your AppGyver application with Firebase in a very simple and easy to implement procedures. First, we will understand what is Firebase and what is NoSQL, how to structure our data in the database, and lastly, how to connect our application with the database and manipulate our data. And before we move on, I want to tell you that you don't need to understand all of the information provided in this video. You can just take an idea and then start implementing your application. And in case you have any question, write directly in the comments so we can discuss together. And please do not forget to support this channel by subscribing and giving a like. Let's start now. So, what is Firebase? Firebase is a platform from Google which helps mobile and web application developers in building powerful and scalable applications. It's a set of back-end services which support different types of applications such as Android, iOS, or web application in different languages. In this tutorial and next tutorials, we will focus on some of Firebase services such as Firestore database for working with data, creating, reading, updating, and deleting, and user authentication for sign in, sign up, and access management, Firebase storage for uploading documents, images, photos, etc. And lastly, Firebase cloud messaging for push notifications. Today we will focus only on Cloud Firestore. What is Cloud Firestore or Firestore database? So Firestore is one of the back-end services within Firebase platform, which is a NoSQL document database that lets the developer to easily store, sync, and query data for mobile and web application at global scale. But what's the meaning of NoSQL? It's an approach to database management which is non-relational, distributed, and scalable. In contrast to relational databases which uses SQL or structured query language to get data from these databases. It's flexible and allows different types of data models. There are many data models for NoSQL databases like tabular, key value, and graph and document. The document is the data model used in Firestore, which is the easiest way in storing the data which requires no schema. The data in NoSQL document database is stored as an object, in which the object has keys and values, something like the example you have. We have the name, the surname and age, these are keys, and Ahmed, Khalid, and 35 are the values for these keys. All are stored in the same object between the curly brackets. This format called JSON. The object which is written in JSON format is stored in a document. So for our example, this user object is stored in a user document. A group of documents is stored in a collection. For example, we have users collection. Again, don't worry if some information were unclear. The only thing you want to understand for now is what is Firebase and what is Firestore and how to start using both and connect your application to a database. Let's move a step forward now and get our hands dirty with Firebase and AppGyver. We will start by going to firebase.google.com and then going to add project. We'll write the name for this project. I will write AppGyver with Firebase as a project name. Under it, it will show us the project ID. One of the services that Google provide is Google Analytics. We don't want this now, so I will disable and then start creating the project. This is the first step in which we just created a project in Firebase. We will wait a little until it's finished. Okay, the project now is ready. Continue. After creating the project, now we will create or we will add our application to this project. We have multiple types of applications. We will start by adding a web application. I will give my web application a name. Let's say it's users web app, and then click register app. Here it will show me some information related to configuration. We can pass it now, and until it's finished we will continue to console. This configuration we will go back to them after finishing setting our applications. Now I will set the Android app by writing Android package name, which should be in this formula com.userapp.android. Application nickname is optional. You can write whatever you want. I write users app for Android and then register app. Again, this is the configuration file for Android. We can pass it now and click next and continue to console. Now we have two applications inside our Firebase project. Until now we didn't do any kind of databases. We just registered our applications, and now we will go from the build menu to Firestore database or from the main menu to Cloud Firestore. Now we reach the Cloud Firestore database inside our AppGyver with Firebase project. I'll click on create database. We have two options, the production mode and test mode. Both are the same, just the first one is the production mode, which will not allow me to read and write data until I make sign in or login. I'll take the first one and then show you how to continue without making authentication. Now I will select where to store this database, in which server, in which area. Then I click enable. Let's wait a little until our Cloud Firestore database is set up correctly. Okay, this is our Cloud Firestore database. We can go back to project settings and then to see the Firestore. This is the difference between the name of the project and the ID of the project. This is the ID AppGyver with Firebase -2064E. This is the project ID, and we have our project name, which is AppGyver with Firebase. Now we will go to rules, in which I'll change this allow read write if false to true, which will give me the opportunity to read and write to the database without making any login. So directly from AppGyver, I can now reach the data, access the data, and start the first collection here. I will call it users. Inside the users collection, I will start the first document, which will have some keys and values. The document ID is auto-generated by Firebase, and now I will add keys and values. I'll add the name, surname, let's add some values. I'll add the age, which will be from the type number, and give it a value. And lastly, I will add the position. So we just created the users collection. Inside this collection, we added one document which represents one user. So this is the users collection. Inside it, we have this document with these keys and values. I will add another document now, just to make the idea clear, and add the same keys and values. This is like adding another user. The age, which is a number, and lastly the position. Let's save. And now again we have two documents with unique IDs inside the users collection, inside our Cloud Firestore database, which is inside our project. Let's go to AppGyver. In this page in AppGyver, I just added some titles and inside the containers, and I will show you how to display the values by connecting to Firestore. We have two options here to connect to Firestore. The first one is through the REST API. I will use the REST API direct connection to reach the data. So I will add a resource, direct integration resource with REST API. I will give the resource an ID and a short description. And lastly, I will get the resource URL. How to get the resource URL? From this page of the Cloud Firestore, I will go to Firebase Developer Documentation. Inside this documentation, I will go to Build. Inside the Build, I will go to Cloud Firestore and get the API reference for REST. So it's so easy. You can get step by step to reach the service endpoint, which is firestore.googleapis.com. And now we will get the resource endpoint for each of the operations we'll make for our resource, like getting all the documents and posting, updating, and deleting. So I'll go to this document. Inside the documents, I will have the list, which is the same as get collections inside AppGyver, and I'll get the request URL for the get collections, which is this one. This is the resource endpoint, and the rest is the name of the project, the ID of the project, the document ID, and the database ID, which I'll set according to my configuration of database. So let's go back and copy one of these. Let's paste this resource URL, which is the endpoint, the base endpoint. And then for getting all the collections, I need this one, the projects, project ID, databases, database ID, documents, and the name of the collection. Let's copy this, paste, and change the project ID to our project ID we just created, which is, as I told you, the AppGyver with Firebase 2064E. Let's try to copy this and paste. I write it directly. It should be exactly as written in Firestore. And the databases, this one is so important. The database, our database is called default between two brackets. This is the default database. So first thing, we will add the project ID, then default, which is the default database, and then the name of the collection I want to retrieve. And the name of the collection should be exactly the same in the same letters. And be careful, not if you have capital or small letters, you should get the same. Now, after testing, I got this error. The result is not an array because the information which is coming from the Firebase is inside the document. So I'll add a response key path, which is documents, and now test again. Okay, so the status now is okay. I can set schema for this collection. Inside the schema I have the fields. Inside the fields I have the key and the value for each of the users. Let's go now for get record. Again, I repeat the same. I'll go to Firestore. Inside the Firestore, I am now in the documents. Inside the documents, I have the get, which give me one document. This is the request URL for getting one document. I'll copy this. Let's close this window and copy this and go back to AppGyver and paste it here. Again, we will add the project ID, which is AppGyver with Firebase, and the number, I'll check it again, 2064E. The databases slash default inside brackets. I'll make it bigger to show you exactly how it's written. And lastly, the collection which I want to get documents from it, which is the users. And then lastly, the ID, which will be added when we will get the document. I'll add document ID. I'll get it from Firebase. Just paste it. Let's copy it again, ensure it's right. Paste and run test. Okay. Now it shows me the result, which is the document I have requested. So now we can set schema from this response. Getting one document. Again, it's inside the fields. All right. Let's go now to post. how to make the post request. In these methods we don't have post, but we have something similar, which is commit, and we have the patch. The patch is the update, but commit is the post for the insert. So I'll go to commit and then get the URL, the path parameters for this HTTP request, copy it, and let's enable this, and then add the URL. Again, the project ID, I'll copy it from here. The database ID, which is default. And documents slash our collection, which is users. Now let's go to test. Now we will add the object which we want to insert inside our database. We have the custom object which the AppGyver has got from the response for the get. If we try to add some data, let's see what will happen. Let's add some dummy data and click save and try to run test. It will show us this error because it needs also other information like the timestamp, the ID of the document, which we don't want to add. We just want the Firebase to add it for us. The name of the document. So for this, I will make another thing now. Let's see. We have two options to set custom schema and add the name, surname, and age and position, which are our keys. But imagine that you have an object with about 20 or 25 keys. It will be very difficult to add 25 keys. So I'll show you another way to do this. Let's remove these properties and go back to test and get the schema of this object from the fields, just the field. Let's copy the fields and go back to the post, and in the record properties I will go to formula, and inside the formula I'll paste these fields. Let's just correct the bracket, the curly brackets. I have the fields. Inside the fields I have the keys and values. I should add 3 closing brackets, I think. Yes, that's it. Now we have set our object correctly. Let's change the values to test the post request. I'll change the values for the keys just for testing and click save, then run test. Status okay, it succeeded. Now Firebase added other fields by default and added a document ID. So this is the document which have been added through AppGyver. Okay, And now I can click set schema from response and our object is ready. Again, you can use custom schema, but this way is easier if you have object with too many keys. All right. Okay, regarding the update record, we don't have the put request in Firebase. As I said, we have here the patch, so we cannot configure the put because it uses the patch request and we don't have patch in AppGyver. We can do another thing. We can use delete and then insert rather than updating. But we can use also HTTP request, which I will show you in next tutorials. Now let's go to delete request for deleting a record. Let's enable it and copy the same information from others. I copy this, enable delete record, and add the ID or add placeholder. Okay, let's add the ID key. Now I will pass the ID to this request and test the deleting. Let's take the ID of the last record we added and run test. Okay, let's check in Firebase. It's deleted correctly. Now we have set all what we need for getting all collections, getting one record, creating record, and deleting record. The only missing thing is the update record, which we will see in our next tutorials. This is, as I said, this is the first way in setting the connection with Firestore. Let's test our connection. I'll go now to variables, to data variables, and add a data variable from the user's database resource which I added, and I'll get a collection of data. Let's change the variable name to users, save, and as we learned from previous tutorials, I'll select this container and repeat with users. And then I will bind each of these values to the data item and repeat with the corresponding value. So this is the name, last name or surname, value, the age, and lastly the position. Okay, let's test our application now. Yes, it succeeded. It has retrieved all the records inside our collection from Firestore. So again, this is the first way in connecting with Firestore. Now let's go to the second way in connecting with Firestore. First, I'll delete everything. I'll delete this resource, the REST API resource, remove, Save. And now let's go back to data, and now I will go to connectors. There is a built-in connector with Google Firebase. Here I will add the configuration I got from when I created the project on Firebase. Let's start one by one. I'll go here to project settings, and then this is the project ID. Let's go now to users web API. Inside it we will have the app ID. It's something so easy. Just you will copy the corresponding one. This is the web ID. I'll configure now the web app configuration, and then go back to Android configuration. This is the API key. I'll copy it and paste it. Now I'll copy the project ID. This one. The authentication domain. Here. Just copy. Paste. The storage bucket. Copy. Paste. The measurement ID is not available, so I'll leave it empty. Now messaging sender ID. Again, the measurement ID is not available. Now I will go to Android app configuration. If you have iOS app, you can just make the same after creating iOS app inside your project. Let's download the Google Services JSON and open this configuration file. I'll copy from it all the values needed. This is the project ID. The API key. The client ID. And finished. Again, if you have iOS, you can enable this. Let's save our project. Now our connection with Firebase is set correctly. Let's go now to variables to delete this data variable. Save. So after setting the connection with Firebase, let's remove this repeat with users, which is not available now, not repeated. Okay. Now I will go to data again. After setting the connector, I will go to data resources and add a data resource, which is a Google Firebase Cloud Firestore resource. Now I will be careful here. The data resource name, which is the name of the data resource I want to use here, I will call it users database. Here the Firestore collection name I want to connect with, it should be the same exactly what we have in the Firestore database, which is users, and then a description. The resource schema, here I should add it manually. Each document has name, surname, let's add surname property, age, and lastly the age is number, and lastly the position. Let's save our data resource. Now after setting the connector again, I created the resource data. Now I can go to repeat with. I didn't create just the variable till now. I'll go to variables and data variables, and then add data variable from users database, which is a collection of data records. I'll change the name to users database. Go back and now check our connection. Users database, and I'll bind now each of the items with the corresponding value inside the object. Alright, let's save and check our application. Great, it worked now. So we have just finished two ways in connecting our application to Firestore database. The first one is the REST API, and the second one is using the connector. Okay, to sum up, we have learned today what is Firebase, which is a backend services platform. One of these services is the Cloud Firestore, which is a NoSQL document database in which we can save our data inside collection and inside documents, and the document is written in JSON object. We have connected our AppGyver application with Cloud Firestore in two ways. The first one is using the REST API connector, and the second one through the Firebase connector. I hope that this tutorial that helpful for you, and in next tutorials we will dive more in creating sophisticated applications using Firebase and Firestore as a database. Thank you so much.